My parents kicked me out when I was only 14 because I brought home lousy grades. It sounds unbelievable, but that's exactly what happened. From there, I transitioned from being homeless to establishing a business that now generates 6 figures in revenue. Yet, when my parents tried to bask in my accomplishments before everyone, I didn't hesitate to unveil all the unpleasant truth about how they really treated me. I'm a 27-year-old man, and I still remember their furious faces as they shoved me onto the streets, basically disowning me. They claimed it was because my grades were so awful. Yes, it still sounds absurd when I say it out loud. Even though our family has been living in the United States for 2 generations, they haven't taken much inspiration from typical American parenting styles on how to nurture and guide children. Instead, they spent my entire childhood obsessing over my academic performance, convinced that top grades were the single path to a fruitful life. To add salt to the wound, my sister, who is just 1 year older, always excelled in her classes. So I was repeatedly compared to her, both in school and at home, day after day, and that comparison absolutely wore me down. During my elementary school years, everything was somewhat manageable. I got A's in most subjects, which I thought was respectable enough, though it never placed me in the top tier like my sister. She graduated elementary school with an A+ and literally topped her class. I, on the other hand, got a straightforward A, not a bad grade by any means, but it still kept me out of the top 10 list. That simple difference ignited my parents' first wave of disappointment in me, and it only escalated from there. Moving into middle school, my parents used my sister's old grade cards as the benchmark for every one of my exam results, practically piling loads of extra pressure onto my shoulders. As this relentless comparison continued, my grades began to slide even further, which of course fueled my parents' anger. My A's from elementary school dropped to BS and CS. With every point I lost, their wrath intensified. Eventually, I reached a level so low in their eyes that they punished me in every way imaginable, aside from physically hitting me, and by that I mean they imposed ridiculous penalties like forcing me to kneel for hours without a drop of water or a morsel of food. Sometimes they starved me the night before a big exam, claiming it would help me concentrate on studying better. Roughly a month before exams, they'd confiscate my video games, lock me at home like a prisoner, forbid me from going out, and strip me of any simple indulgence like ice cream, chocolate, or my favorite snacks. Their go-to phrase was always, "Get good grades, then you'll get what you want." Eventually, I just stopped asking for anything altogether because it was clear I would never receive it. My parents run a small grocery store on the back street. My grandparents were immigrants to the U.S., with my grandfather toiling away as a day laborer and my grandmother working as a janitor. They each held 2 jobs to raise my father and my 2 uncles, barely making ends meet but managing through relentless hard work. My father had to quit his education early so he could help support the family, and he's been working since he was 11. My mother's background is similar. Both of them worked around the clock in their teens and 20s to save up enough to open that little store on the corner. Their logic is that earning high grades is the only guaranteed path to escaping poverty. We aren't as financially desperate as they make it seem, but they hold on to the typical old-fashioned Asian mentality of saving endlessly, just in case, even if it means depriving ourselves in the present. While I respect how hard they've worked and their unwavering trust in formal education, they grossly exaggerated its importance. Honestly, how you perform at school shouldn't matter to an extreme degree, as long as you don't fail the entire year. And even if you do repeat a grade, it's not the end of the world. Yes, it delays you by a year, but you can still recover. By torturing a child so harshly over academics, they were laying the groundwork for eventual disaster. As a kid, I really did give it my best to match my sister's academic record, but it simply didn't happen. I struggled with memorizing pages and pages of facts and definitions as easily as she could, yet I excelled in math skills that didn't require loads of rote memorization. Over time, as their punishments got more severe, I developed a rebellious streak. I started cutting classes on purpose, lingering at the playground, or scribbling nonsensical jokes and song lyrics on my exam sheets just to get under their skin. In retaliation, they locked me in the basement with a stack of textbooks and would only let me out after I finished. Summers and weekends were always bleak because I was forbidden from going outside, and my games and comics were seized. They refused to replace any of them, so I had nothing to occupy my mind except textbooks. But I was resourceful, and despite their tight restrictions, I found ways to sneak out and enjoy my time. My parents were usually away at the grocery store all day, so I took advantage of their absence and played outside until they returned at night. When my parents realized I was leaving the house while they were gone, they responded by dragging me along with them to the store on weekends and during summer break. They intended this as the ultimate punishment, but ironically, I found that I really liked it there. I got a thrill from talking to customers, recommending the right types of milk or cereal brands, or casually helping at the billing counter. This, however, infuriated my parents. They never wanted me to take over or even be interested in running a humble grocery store, since in their minds, being a doctor or engineer was the only respectable occupation. They saw sales jobs as something reserved for uneducated individuals. They strongly believed that with all the money they were paying for my education, I should step into a noble profession, one that doesn't involve basic selling. One day, without realizing how offended they would be, I made a passing comment about how I dreamed of being a salesman, since I noticed I was good at convincing customers to buy. The horror on their faces was evident. They viewed it as a dreadful choice, something they looked down upon with extreme prejudice, and they wanted me to have a high-status job they could flaunt to other Asian families. The tension between us kept snowballing, and it eventually reached a boiling point when I got an F in my first year of high school. That meant I had to repeat the year, and my parents basically blew up. They treated it as though I'd committed a huge crime. Since they had already tried just about every punishment under the sun, excluding physically hitting me, they resorted to mental torment through severe verbal abuse, telling me I had forever shamed them. They couldn't take the disgrace, they said. So they tossed me out of the house and cut me off completely, threatening me to never return, not even if I was on the verge of starving or freezing to death. I felt shattered and terrified, because despite my mischief and rebelliousness, I never actually imagined running away or living on the streets. I had no one to turn to, no friends I could lean on, since they'd systematically prevented me from socializing. I was either confined at home or forced to be at the store helping them. The first night was brutal, sleeping on a park bench with no roof over my head, but then a strange sense of liberation set in. At 14, I realized that I finally had the freedom to do whatever I wanted without being micromanaged. The very next day, I combed through downtown seeking any type of sales job, knowing that was my strong suit. I popped into countless stores, probably a dozen, inquiring about openings. Eventually, I got a chance at a beauty shop that was in urgent need of extra staff. The owner tested me by asking me to persuade a customer who intended to buy only a night cream to also buy an expensive lipstick. To my own surprise, I succeeded, and the owner found my energy and charming approach promising. Even though I lacked qualifications and hadn't worked anywhere else, he hired me because he noticed that spark. The paycheck wasn't big, but at least he let me sleep in a small corner. Over time, as I helped improve the shop's sales, I negotiated to receive a commission on top of my base salary, and that small step laid the foundation for my path to business success. Little did my parents realize that forcing me to help at their grocery store was the best gift they could have given me, as it equipped me with real-world experience dealing with money, inventory, and especially interacting with people. It's a shame they didn't see that I had a knack for the practical side of business, far more than just stuffing facts into my brain to regurgitate on a test. Once I got into the workforce, I quickly changed jobs whenever I found better pay. At one point, one of my employers offered to fund my college tuition if I stuck around, but by then, I had a different ambition. I wanted to start my own enterprise. By the time I turned 21, I was ready to launch a company dedicated to handling sales and support for various small businesses. Essentially, we close deals for different product-focused clients, whether they're marketing credit cards, insurance packages, cosmetics, or even books, and they reward us with sizable commissions. It didn't skyrocket instantly. It took more than 5 years for it to become stable. I started off with a tiny team of 5 people representing a single client specializing in mattresses and pillows. Today, we've expanded to a 200-person operation, covering well over 50 companies, pushing all sorts of merchandise into the market. Anyway, enough of that backstory. Let's get to the real situation. About a month or so ago, my mother started obsessively monitoring my Facebook and Instagram. I keep my accounts public for brand exposure and personal reasons, so she's been creeping through my older posts and pictures, liking them out of the blue. Maybe she's just zooming in on them out of curiosity, or maybe it's her way of grabbing my attention. Regardless of her intention, it's obvious she's spellbound by the life I'm living. She probably can't reconcile the boy they once called a loser with my current 6-figure monthly income. Not too long ago, just a week ago, in fact, she messaged me, saying how much she missed me and that she wanted me to come back home. I read her words and deliberately left her on scene. She's showering me with compliments, bragging about how proud they both are. She's urging me to pay them a visit. I keep ignoring her, but memories keep flooding back of the horrors I faced in my childhood, making it impossible to focus on anything else. Part of me aches to return, to shove my newfound fortune in their faces and make them regret ever doubting me. But on the flip side, my girlfriend is adamant that they might use emotional manipulation to squeeze money out of me. She warns me to stay away and not get caught in their web of guilt trips. I'm torn. Should I confront them and show them who I've become, or is it wiser to stay out of their reach? Update 1. So here's the big twist, kind of comedic, if I'm being honest. Even though my girlfriend tried talking me out of meeting my parents, there was a part of me craving the moment where I could flaunt my accomplishments in front of them. So I strolled right back into my childhood home, unannounced. My dad was absent, but my mother and sister were sitting there as if they had been eagerly waiting. Apparently my dad remains clueless or in denial about the genuine success I've achieved. He goes around telling people I'm engaging in shady scams to earn all this money and that he wants nothing to do with me. My mom, on the other hand, was suddenly apologetic, claiming she had only followed orders from my dad all these years because of his old school beliefs about perfect grades ensuring a perfect life. The funny bit is how she seemed to blame everything on him, even though she was equally strict, if not more so. I pointed out that she was the one who used to come up with fiercer punishments, but she laughed as if it were a centuries-old fairy tale and insisted it was time to forget the past, reunite, and be a happy family. As if it could be that easy. I shifted my attention to my sister and asked about her life. She explained she finished her master's in literature but was having trouble finding a teaching job, blaming her weak communication abilities and her limited social skills. Knowing her backstory, I was fairly certain it had everything to do with our parents' approach of keeping her cooped up inside books for eternity. She barely socialized throughout her entire childhood. My mother was so paranoid that she wouldn't even allow her to make friends at school, particularly if they were white, because she feared that white kids wouldn't have the same academic rigor and would derail her. It's so obvious to me that this kind of upbringing is largely the reason why she's facing challenges now as an adult, even with her stellar academic record. I realized just how lucky I was to have rebelled against our parents instead of letting them cage me into that type of mental prison. On top of that, my sister and I openly criticized our mother for their failed parenting methods, and my mom quickly started crying and shifted all blame to my father again. Once the drama subsided a bit, I asked my mom why she had called me over. She blabbered about how proud she was, but it was clear she didn't actually know anything about what I do, apart from the fact that I own a business. In her mind, all forms of entrepreneurship, like running a store, are the same, and she fails to see the difference between running a little shop on the corner and running a multi-industry sales company. Within those four walls, my mind was bombarded with memories of how they once convinced me I was doomed to the streets, that I'd end up as a worthless outcast, maybe even doing drugs or getting caught up in criminal activity. They had the audacity to suggest I had mental difficulties just because I wasn't acing math or science classes. That's right, they even dragged me to see a therapist, believing there was something off in my brain. The therapist, bless her, turned the blame right back on my parents, calling them out for subjecting me to unnecessary stress. My girlfriend had bet me that my mom was calling me to ask for a handout, but so far, my mother has not made a direct money request. Instead, she's been sweet-talking me non-stop. My girlfriend is now convinced that they'll try to wring money out of me eventually, and we've turned it into a little game, a $1 bet each time my mom messages me, guessing if she'll beg for money. So far, I'm winning because the request hasn't arrived yet. But mom recently invited me to dinner this weekend, and I feel like that big money conversation is just around the corner. I got a text from her saying she's arranging a lovely dinner in my honor, and I have a gut feeling she's doing her best to look good before she brings up any requests. I'll let you know what happens as soon as I can. For now, I have to get going. Update 2. Hey, guess what? I finally got my sweet payback, and I have a sneaky feeling my parents won't be calling me again after the spectacle I caused. In my previous post, I mentioned that my mom invited me for dinner. I feigned busyness and replied that I couldn't come. Honestly, I was just being dramatic. She kept insisting, so I pressed her on why she was suddenly being so nice, especially when my dad is out there telling everyone I'm making dirty money. She then claimed that dad was the one organizing this dinner as an olive branch. He apparently wanted to make amends. I asked her what she meant by organizing, since it's just the four of us, right? She shocked me by saying they had also invited close friends and relatives who lived nearby. I agreed to come because, to me, this was an even better chance to get a bit of revenge for everything they put me through as a child. Mom asked me to arrive on time and be dressed impeccably. Of course, the inner rebel in me wasn't going to play by her rules. So I put on a gym sweatshirt, my old trekking shorts, and a baseball cap, and I deliberately showed up 2 hours late. For a conservative Asian household, wearing shorts to a formal gathering is practically a felony. Throughout my childhood, my parents always prided themselves on presenting the perfect image to neighbors and extended family. I could just imagine them freaking out as the clock ticked and I was nowhere in sight. And if anyone was paying attention when I arrived, my casual outfit must have sent them over the edge. When I finally made it there, it turned out they had reserved a rooftop section of this nice restaurant. A few eyebrows were raised at my clothes, but they quickly masked their judgments with forced grins, probably because I'm now wealthier than any of them. My parents had no choice but to greet me with hugs and a toast, showering me with words of praise. I have to mention it was the very first time Dad had ever hugged me, and it felt hollow and artificial. I couldn't help wondering if I had misread them all these years or if they were just very skilled at putting on a show. At one point, I almost thought maybe I was the jerk for causing them grief, but then they started parading my successes and material possessions as if they had personally coached me to greatness. My outspoken aunt chimed in, calling them out by asking why they deserved any credit when they had literally cast me out of their house. I couldn't hold back my laughter and even applauded her bravery. My parents, of course, blushed from embarrassment, but they hurriedly tried to cover it up, declaring that their decision to eject me from home was precisely the reason I pulled myself together. They had the nerve to claim that it was their tough love that shaped me into the man I am today. That was my breaking point. I basically lost it. I sarcastically told them how grateful I am for their toxic approach and for dumping me onto the streets as a young teenager. I reminded them of how they used to prophesy that I'd turn into a homeless addict or even a criminal. And I didn't stop there. I went on to publicly recount every punishing moment, from missing out on family trips to being locked in the house for a week with minimal food. I highlighted how they confined me to a basement with next to no ventilation, telling me I couldn't come out until my homework was complete. I sneered that perhaps everyone else in the room should follow their example if they want successful children. I probably ranted for a good few minutes, unleashing years of pent-up resentment and pain in one grand outburst. My mom tried to interject, but I waved her off. My sister tried to calm me by touching my arm, but I was far past any rational stopping point. Naturally, my parents were mortified. I imagine they would have preferred dropping dead rather than facing this level of humiliation in front of relatives and close friends. But I had zero sympathy for their pride. My sister, standing right there beside me, broke down in tears too. Some of you might wonder why I still care about her if she never stood up for me when I was a kid. I don't blame her, though. She was just a kid herself, barely a year older. My parents ruined her life even more than mine by pushing her into extreme isolation, while at least I found ways to rebel. She's never had a taste of real freedom or self-confidence. She still lives at home, completely stunted by that upbringing. Even now, I'm trying to help her by offering her a position at my company and encouraging her to take personality development classes. She's attempted to improve, but her communication barriers are severe. She'll probably need more time and support to fully bloom. Anyway, after my final tirade at that dinner, I told my mother not to contact me again, announcing I was only there to settle the score. Then I blocked her from every possible channel of communication. My sister actually praised me for finally exposing the truth, stating that it was the perfect vengeance because our parents care more about their faultless image than anything else in the world. They don't crave money, they crave social validation. A few extended family members and acquaintances contacted me afterward, offering apologetic words about how sorry they felt for all I had gone through. I made it clear that I wasn't seeking sympathy. I just wanted the entire community to see that punishing a child relentlessly over grades is counterproductive. Our family stands as proof of parenting gone wrong. Now, let me shift to the second story. I had an affair, and my husband found out. After that, he pretended to forgive me for a while, but then he revealed his hidden motives. Ultimately, he's choosing to leave me for someone else, someone he apparently used in order to make me feel the same jealousy and hurt he once felt. I'm a 30-year-old woman, and my husband is 27. I messed up big time by cheating on him, and now he's handling it in a way that makes me think he despises me deep inside. I'm perfectly aware that what I did was shameful and unforgivable. The guilt consumed me so much that I cut off any contact with my affair partner and confessed everything to my husband. I expected a massive blow-up, but he looked sad and depressed more than he looked raging mad. I literally got on my knees, begging him not to divorce me. I suggested therapy, both professional counseling and couples therapy, or even letting him have intimate encounters with other women. I was willing to swallow my pride. But he showed little to no interest in any of these suggestions, only saying he wanted to try and fix our marriage. I was elated, thinking it was a step toward reconciliation. I started cooking his favorite meals every day, leaving him sappy love notes, and dressing in brand new lingerie. Yet, his response to my efforts was lukewarm. He smiled politely and thanked me, but not once after my confession did he utter the words, "I love you." He barely even acknowledged my attempts to rekindle our bond, so I had to throw myself at him if I wanted any physical closeness. He didn't complain, but he was never enthusiastic either. Every time we spoke about my betrayal, he just put on this calm expression that revealed absolutely nothing. Sometimes I wish he'd just yell at me, insult me, or blame me, because I'd at least know he still felt something. Instead, I saw only a superficial mask of civility, and I was beginning to believe that nothing I did would change how distant and disconnected he was. People asked if this was a troll story, so let me clarify by providing some background. My husband and I have been together for 5 years, and my affair lasted a couple of months with someone I met through work, a client, to be exact. I have zero interaction with that client now. I redirected his contract to a colleague so I wouldn't even have to see his name in my emails. I've been attending individual therapy sessions to figure out how I let this happen. My mind felt as if it were running on autopilot, and I can't pinpoint a single moment or motive that triggered me to cheat. Update 1. So my husband obviously knows I cheated, but he hasn't walked away, nor did he say he forgave me. I pleaded with him to let me at least try to make amends, and he agreed to stay. The trouble is, his indifference hasn't budged. As I mentioned in my earlier update, I've been working extra hard to be the ideal wife, cooking, cleaning, spoiling him, and maintaining a vibrant sex life, but he only reciprocates with mild niceness. He doesn't yell or lash out, but I can feel this wall of ice between us. Then, 2 weeks ago, he started staying out ridiculously late, sometimes rolling in at 2 or 3 in the morning. When I ask about it, he sweetly replies that it's not my business, and that's it. Sometimes I call him while he's out, but he usually doesn't pick up. On one occasion, I heard a woman's laughter in the background, which stung. A mutual friend even said she spotted him in a car with another woman, claiming they looked cozy, possibly touching hands or legs. I can't say if he's really having an affair, but the uncertainty is agonizing. If he's doing this to punish me, I deserve it, but I desperately want clarity. The torment of not knowing is excruciating. Yet when I confront him, he either shuts me down or offers bland reassurance that nothing is going on. Update 2. He left me. I tried the advice people suggested. I demanded a real conversation. I pretty much fell apart emotionally, weeping and screaming so intensely that I started vomiting. He took pity on me and helped me clean up before finally opening up. I asked if he was cheating, and he answered that he was talking to someone else but hadn't physically done anything with her. When I pressed him on the woman our friend had seen, he claimed that she wasn't the same woman from his office he'd been confiding in. Supposedly, he'd met this coworker around a month ago and unloaded all his frustrations about our marriage onto her, making it seem like they were in a steamy fling so I'd experienced the same gut-wrenching insecurity and pain he felt. He said I should know how painful it is to be betrayed, especially because I had blatantly overlooked his emotional well-being and practically rubbed my own affair in his face. I told him I never intended to flaunt my fling, but he responded that my obliviousness was even worse. To him, it meant I never cared enough to notice his suffering. After that, he told me point blank that everything I've done since my confession, trying to please him, cooking, and doing wifely things, just reinforced his belief that I'm self-centered and lacking in genuine self-respect. He made up his mind. Our marriage was over. He said he didn't want me to rot in despair or anything like that, and he was done faking this cat-and-mouse game of revenge, but it was too late for us. The person he once fell in love with, he claimed, no longer existed. I begged him to let me work on myself, to go to therapy, to rebuild our love, but he wouldn't relent. He revealed he found a new place to move into already. I asked whether he intended to live with that new woman, and he denied it. But he did say she was close enough to him that he felt she was a better fit than I was. Furious, I asked how he could pick some stranger of 1 month over the wife he had spent 5 years with. He responded that I had become a stranger too, so really, it was a choice between two strangers, and the new woman had left a better impression of loyalty and trust. I called him a fool, warning him that she could hurt him in the end. He fired back harshly, saying that no matter what happens, she couldn't be worse than me. He then vowed not to drag my name through the mud, telling family or friends that I cheated. All he wants is a peaceful divorce. But if I try to make it messy, like taking him to court for everything or causing drama, he'll destroy my reputation by exposing all the details of my affair. He left the next day and packed up nearly all his belongings, and I couldn't believe how real it was until it happened. I spent those moments in hysterical tears, never imagining our marriage would end like this. The whole thing strikes me as unbelievably cruel and unfair. One last comment from me: people say I'm horrible for doing what I did, and they're right. But I can't help feeling that my husband bears some blame too, for never sincerely wanting to fix anything. He seemed to just exploit me to get his version of revenge before tossing me aside. Despite all of that, I still yearn for him to forgive me, to wipe the slate clean. As for this woman he's gravitating toward, I have no idea if she's right for him or if she'll hurt him, and sadly, I don't have the standing to intervene now. Update 3. Earlier today, I was formally served with divorce papers. 2 weeks had gone by since he walked out on me, claiming he'd found someone else, but according to the intel I got from my friends, it's unclear if he's genuinely living or getting romantically involved with anyone at the moment. There's been no solid evidence. I hoped he just needed space to think, that he'd eventually come back to me once the pain subsided. But receiving those divorce papers has shattered the bubble I was clinging to. I keep telling myself this can't be real, that I'll wake up from this horrifying dream and my husband will be by my side again. But the harsh truth is that he's done. He wants out. And I can't process how the life we built together is crumbling apart. I still love him deeply, and I would give anything to stop this from happening, but it's like the more I try, the further away he moves. All I can do is stare at those divorce documents and wonder where everything went so horribly, irreversibly wrong.